Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
In April, California Governor Gavin Newsom announced a new tourism campaign. It touted the usual Golden State attractions, beaches, vineyards, national parks, you know the drill. But it was marketing to a very specific kind of tourist.
California, it's the ultimate playground, 2,000 miles from Washington and a world away in mindset.
California has a lot of sunshine, he said.
And a whole lot of love for our neighbors up north.
Canadians. California was trying to woo Canadians.
Truth is, California just wouldn't be California without Canada. Thank you, Canada.
They wanted to show Canada some love because, well, the state was getting a cold shoulder from this important tourist group. This past February, Visit California saw a canary in the coal mine. Fewer Canadians were flying to the state.
We saw significant declines in February and March. In March, it was 15.5% alone, dip just from the Canada market.
That's Angie Pappas. She works in media relations at Visit California, the nonprofit organization that promotes tourism across the state.
There was a lot of conversation about Canada being the 51st state that was maybe not the most helpful for inspiring Canadians to want to spend their vacation dollars in the United States.
Canadians weren't booking trips to California. So basically, when Visit California called,
there was just no appetite for Canadian news outlets to write about the United States or travel to the United States. California wants to welcome travelers from around the world. In this instance, it seemed like Canada maybe needed a little bit of extra reassurance that they are wanted here.
California isn't alone in experiencing this downturn. And it's not just Canadians. The U.S. has seen a decline in international tourism that's forecasted to cost the economy $12.5 billion for the year. That will actually widen the trade deficit because spending by visitors in the U.S. actually counts as an American export.
If you're in the travel and tourism industry in the U.S. right now, it is a grim picture, and I'd be nervous, right?
Oanh Ha is the host of Big Take Asia. She also covers the travel and tourism industries at Bloomberg.
Simply put, Trump 2.0 and many of the policies coming from the White House are off-putting for people overseas. And that's showing up in their choice of where or where not to vacation.
America first, tariffs, travel bans, the image of America as the shining city on the hill has dimmed. I'm David Gura, and this is The Big Take from Bloomberg News. Today on the show, the dramatic shift in U.S. tourism during President Trump's second term. Which cities and business sectors are feeling it the hardest, and where travelers are heading instead. Before the start of President Trump's second term, 2025 was expected to be a bumper year for U.S. tourism, even approaching pre-pandemic levels, if not beating them.
Tourism isn't going to come back to pre-pandemic levels until 2029 or even 2030. And for now, the summer isn't looking good either. You've got global air bookings to the U.S. from May 1st to July 31st, 11% lower than a year ago. That's according to research outfit Tourism Economics.
At this stage, is it possible to quantify, to put a number on how big a loss this is for the U.S. economy, how big a loss it's likely to be?
It's huge numbers. One estimate by the World Travel and Tourism Council says that spending by overseas visitors this year is going to fall 7%. You know, of the 184 economies that the council tracks, the U.S. is the only one where tourism spending is expected to fall this year.
The only one?
The only economy, yeah.
We're seeing that in the numbers. In May, overseas visitors to the U.S. fell nearly 3% compared to last year. That's according to the government's preliminary data. Now, the monthly visitor numbers also dropped in February and March. And a 3% drop may seem small, but it's actually a big deal because it bucks the trend. Foreign visitors to the U.S. have been on the rise since 2021 during the COVID pandemic, until this year.
President Donald Trump, soon after he took office in late January, announced the tariff wars. So you've got tariff wars on Mexico, on Canada, on China. And of course, there are also planned tariffs on the EU and in pretty much all of the U.S. trading partners.
Other actions by the administration could affect travelers' interest in traveling to the U.S. or their ability to visit. In June, President Trump sent the National Guard to quell ICE protests in Los Angeles. He also announced a new travel ban on 12 countries,
Today, I am signing a new executive order placing travel restrictions on countries including Yemen, Somalia, Haiti, Libya, and numerous others.
And then on top of that, we've got crackdowns at the borders. You know, there have been viral stories about backpackers from Canada and Wales who've been detained for weeks by U.S. Immigration and Customs at the border.
ICE then arrested the Canadian.
A German tourist says she was taken into custody by ICE.
Dutch guy that had a green card, flagged at the border.
And as a result, we've seen a dozen countries issue these travel advisories or update their travel advisories, warning their citizens that if they travel to the U.S., they risk being detained, they risk not being allowed in, or they're having their devices searched and seized.
Digging into these data a little bit more, into more detail, what are the sectors that are seeing the largest losses? Is it hospitality? Is it aviation?
It's really across the board. I mean, the losses will hit, all of these businesses in the travel and tourism ecosystem. I mean, you've got hotels to airlines to restaurants. There's one estimate that the travel industry supported more than 20 million jobs last year. So these are pretty big numbers. I think the industry that's seeing the most immediate pain that we're hearing about is, of course, the hotels. We're already seeing reports that hotels along the U.S.-Canadian border are seeing a big plunge in visitors. You've also got Expedia, Airbnb. They've warned that their upcoming financial results are going to be weaker than expected because of the softening demand in the U.S. And we've also seen airlines, cut back on overseas flights from places like Heathrow to major U.S. hotspots.
When you look at specific cities in the country, are they all suffering across the board, or are there some that have weathered this better than others?
So it's not looking good for cities and states that rely on tourism dollars. Of the top 20 American cities that attracted the most spending by foreign tourists last year, 18 are going to see drops this year. That's according to tourism economics forecasts. Now, California has like 4 cities on that list. Los Angeles and nearby Riverside are expected to see tourist spending fall by as much as 7%. Florida is also going to feel the pain. Tampa is the hardest hit city on the list. Visitor spending there is taking a dive to nearly 11% this year. Interestingly, New York City was actually one of the few cities that is forecast to still see a gain this year, but officials there aren't optimistic. New York City in May cut its foreign visitors forecast by 17%, and they cited Trump's tariffs and the detention of immigrants. So across the U.S., the largest cities that attract foreign tourists and overseas spending, nearly all of them are down on both measures.
As you were reporting this out, how much worry, how much concern is there in these cities, in the U.S. broadly, about this trend and this trend continuing?
I think there's a lot of concern. I mean, what's interesting is that it's not just leisure travelers who we're seeing pull back. It's also business travelers as well. We saw the Global Business Travelers Association. They had originally forecast, I think, that business travel was going to climb to a record $1.63 trillion this year. But now with all that's going on, the group says that they're expecting a drop of 5%.
After the break, if people aren't traveling to the U.S., where are they going? And who is still coming to the States? I want to see if we can marry the data that we've been talking about with what you've seen on the ground as you've been reporting, as you've been traveling. What are people telling you about their appetite for travel?
Asia is definitely benefiting from a more welcoming stance to, foreign tourists. I'm here in Bangkok for a visit this week. You see a lot of long-haul travelers. We saw air bookings, for example, from Germany, from France, from the UK, Italy. Those air bookings to the US are down for the summer. And instead, it looks like, visitors from those countries are now headed to Japan. They're headed to China. They're headed to India. Japan is a big, hotspot and a big standout winner. The cheap yen obviously is attracting a lot of tourism. The country said that it saw nearly 4 million foreign arrivals in April. That was the most in any single month ever. China's relaxed its visa requirements. Most travelers are enjoying visa-free entry to Singapore, to places like Thailand, to Malaysia, even the Philippines. China as well, and domestic tourism is booming. Intra-travel within Asia has become super popular as well. So instead of going to the US, for example, you'll have, Singaporeans or Hong Kong friends or Taiwan friends say they're going to Japan or they're going to Vietnam or Indonesia. People are really exploring what's in their backyard. So these governments are seeing tourism as really key to their economic rebalancing and growth. And they're rolling out the welcome mat to tourism. Everyone is really wanting to welcome foreign tourists, except for the U.S.
We have a colleague who moved to Tokyo, and before she left, she told me, you got to visit. The yen is so weak. It's well worth doing at this point in time. How much of a motivator is currency? Is a weak currency relative to the dollar a motivating factor for people who are looking to travel?
Yeah, it's huge. People are being lured to Japan. I mean, I myself have gone there 3 times, and
three times. That's amazing.
3 times. Well, because of the cheaper yen, my dollars go much further in Japan. So that's definitely been a plus. And a lot of visitors, especially ones from around Asia, are coming to Japan because of the yen's weakness and because they can afford Japan now. When it comes to the US, the strong dollar had been a deterrent for international visitors. The dollar's weakened recently, and the question remains whether that will be a strong enough incentive for foreign visitors to come despite other misgivings. The dollar is a factor, but it's not the only factor when people plan vacations.
So when we're seeing all of these declines, who is still coming to the U.S. as we've seen this downturn in travel?
That's a good question, because among the biggest markets to the U.S. in May, we did still see big gains in travelers from Argentina, from Italy, from Taiwan. And we also saw gains from visitors from Russia for the 3rd consecutive month. What was also interesting with the May numbers is that we saw the number of people entering on tourism visas drop overall, but visitors coming in on business visas actually showed a gain from last year.
Can we read into that anything about this political moment in the U.S.?
Well, certainly between Russia and the U.S., right?
Yeah.
I think Russians may feel like they're perhaps more welcome to the U.S. than other tourists from other countries at this point. So I think a lot of it, you're right, does hinge on where we are politically at this very moment.
We've been talking about international travelers and their attitude toward the U.S. Have you been able to glean anything just about how Americans are feeling about travel at this point in time?
So Americans are traveling, but economic concerns are definitely factoring into the trip planning too. Across the board, when you look at these polls and surveys, you are seeing that Americans are making some hard choices, when it comes to vacations. In one survey that I saw, almost 70% said they made at least one adjustment to their holiday plans because of economic concerns. And I think 14% said they were foregoing more expensive overseas trips and instead vacationing within the U.S. We did see in the Japan numbers that actually Americans in April made up like the 4th biggest group of travelers to Japan. So everybody loves the cheap yen.
Well, before I let you go, bearing in mind you said you've been to Japan 3 times already this year, I'm curious about your travel plans and if any of the trends that we've been talking about have led you to reevaluate or to change the plans for trips that you've got lined up.
Well, I love Japan, but it's nice to avoid the crowds. And I'm planning a trip as we speak, a hiking trip through Kazakhstan. Never been to any of the Stan's countries, to Central Asia. Lots of lakes to swim in and lots of hills to climb. So I'm really looking forward to planning that.
Juan, I'd usually say thank you, but this time I'm going to say have a great trip.
Thanks, David. I'll send you a postcard.
This is The Big Take from Bloomberg News. I'm David Gura. To get more from The Big Take and unlimited access to all of Bloomberg.com, subscribe today at Bloomberg.com/podcast offer. If you like this episode, make sure to follow and review The Big Take wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps people find the show. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.